How does a company that blows up rockets make billions of dollars? Most people think SpaceX is about Mars, about Elon's dreams, about the future of humanity. And sure, that's the story, but here's what actually pays the bills. SpaceX isn't a space exploration company. It's a logistics company that happens to operate 200 miles above your head. And the business model? It's almost annoyingly simple once you see it. So let's start with what everyone assumes. SpaceX makes money by launching rockets, right? NASA pays them, satellites go up, money comes down, easy. Except that's not really the story. Because if you dig into SpaceX's actual revenue streams, something weird shows up. They're not just launching things for other people anymore, they're launching things for themselves. Thousands of things. And those things are generating revenue on a completely different level than anything NASA could ever pay them. Let me put it this way. In 2023, SpaceX pulled in roughly $4.6 billion in revenue. About $1.5 billion came from launch services, government contracts, commercial satellites, the stuff you'd expect. But the rest, the other $3 billion, that came from Starlink, SpaceX's own internet service. So the company that was supposed to be about rockets is actually making most of its money selling internet to people in rural Montana. That's the first twist, but it gets better. Let's zoom in on the rocket side first, because this is where SpaceX actually broke the system. For decades, launching a satellite into space cost somewhere between $150 and $400 million per launch. That's what companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin charged through their joint venture, United Launch Alliance. It was expensive, slow, and basically a monopoly. Then SpaceX showed up in the mid-2000s with a pitch that sounded insane. We'll do it for $60 million, and we'll reuse the rockets. Everyone laughed. Rockets were disposable. You used them once, they fell into the ocean, done. The idea of landing a rocket booster on a floating platform in the Atlantic and flying it again, that was science fiction. Except SpaceX actually did it. In 2015, they landed their first Falcon 9 booster. By 2017, they were reflying them. And suddenly, the cost per launch dropped to around $67 million, then $50 million. Now, depending on the mission, it can go as low as $30 million. Here's why that matters. SpaceX can undercut every competitor on Earth and still make a profit. NASA is paying them to launch astronauts to the International Space Station. The Pentagon's paying them to put up spy satellites. Private companies are paying them to deploy telecom infrastructure. And because SpaceX owns the rockets and reuses them, their margins are insane compared to the old model. But here's the thing, launch revenue is capped. There are only so many satellites people want to put up in a given year. There are only so many government contracts to win. So SpaceX stopped waiting for customers to pay them to launch satellites. They started launching their own satellites and then charging people to use them. Starlink is where this whole thing flips. Right now, there are over 5,000 Starlink satellites orbiting Earth. SpaceX plans to deploy tens of thousands more, and every single one of them is basically a flying internet router. Here's the model. You're in a place where cable internet doesn't exist, middle of nowhere, rural Texas, a farm in Iowa, a boat in the Gulf of Mexico. You buy a Starlink dish for $500, you pay SpaceX $120 a month, and boom, you've got high-speed internet beamed down from space. No fiber optic cables, no phone lines, just satellites and a clear view of the sky. Now Starlink has about 2.3 million subscribers as of late 2023. Let's do the math. 2.3 million people paying roughly $120 a month. That's around $276 million in revenue per month, over $3 billion a year, and that number is growing fast. But here's the beautiful part for SpaceX. They control the entire supply chain. They build the satellites, they launch the satellites using their own rockets, which means they're basically paying themselves to deploy their own product. They control the ground stations, they control the customer experience. It's vertically integrated in a way that almost no other company on the planet can match. And the margins? Brutal. Once the satellites are up there, the cost to operate them is relatively low. You're not paying for poles, for cables, for local infrastructure. You're paying for bandwidth and maintenance. The more customers you add, the more profitable the whole system becomes. Traditional internet service providers spent decades and billions of dollars laying cable across America. SpaceX skipped all of that. They just went straight up.
Now, let's not pretend Starlink is the only thing keeping the lights on. SpaceX still makes a ton of money from the government, and I mean a ton. NASA's paying them to launch cargo and crew to the ISS. That's about $3 billion over multiple contracts. The Pentagon's paying them through the National Security Space Launch Program, another $2 billion across several years. Then there's the Artemis program, the plan to put humans back on the moon. NASA awarded SpaceX nearly $3 billion to develop the lunar lander version of their Starship rocket. And here's the kicker. These contracts aren't just revenue, they're subsidies for research and development. NASA's basically funding the technology that SpaceX will later use to launch more Starlink satellites, send private tourists to space, and eventually, maybe, get to Mars. It's a closed loop. Government money helps SpaceX build better rockets make Starlink cheaper to deploy. Starlink generates private revenue that makes SpaceX less dependent on government contracts, which means they can take bigger risks, move faster, and undercut competitors even more. It's like the government accidentally created its own rival. So that's how SpaceX makes money today. But what about tomorrow? Because the thing about SpaceX is they're not just running a business, they're building infrastructure for an industry that barely exists yet. Starship, their next-generation rocket, is designed to be fully reusable, both stages. If it works, the cost per launch could drop to under $10 million, maybe even $2 million. At that price, you're not just launching satellites, you're launching entire space stations, you're launching fuel depots, you're mining equipment to asteroids, and yeah, maybe one day, humans to Mars. But even before Mars, there's money to be made. Space tourism is already happening. SpaceX has flown private citizens to orbit. They've got contracts with companies like Axiom Space to send tourists to the ISS. Tickets cost tens of millions of dollars per seat. It's a niche market now, but it's growing. Then there's the possibility of point-to-point travel on Earth. Imagine flying from New York to Tokyo in under an hour by going through space. Starship could theoretically do that. It sounds crazy, but so did reusable rockets 15 years ago. And if Starlink keeps growing, SpaceX could become one of the largest internet service providers on the planet, not just in rural areas, everywhere. Planes, ships, military operations, disaster zones, anywhere you need connectivity and can't wait for ground infrastructure. The company that started by trying to send mice to Mars is now quietly becoming a backbone of global communication. So here's the thing about SpaceX. The rockets are impressive, the engineering is world-class, the vision is grand. But the money comes from doing something no one else can do cheaper, faster, and at scale. They turned launch costs into a rounding error. They turned satellites into a subscription service. They turned government contracts into R&D funding for private profit. And the wildest part, they're just getting started. Most companies would kill to dominate one industry. SpaceX is building 3 at the same time. Launch services, satellite internet, space infrastructure, and all of it runs on the same core idea. Own the rockets, own the supply chain, own the future. So the next time you see a Falcon 9 landing on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean, don't just think about the cool factor. Think about the business model. Because that rocket, it's not just flying, it's printing money. The question isn't whether SpaceX makes money, it's whether anyone else can catch up.